Hello, my name is Christopher Renstrom, and I'm your weekly horoscope columnist here on Astrology Hub. And today, I wanted to talk to you about Pluto, retrograding back down into the zodiac sign of Capricorn. But before I do, did you know that you could connect with me every week by joining Astrology Hub's Inner Circle? Just go to astrologyhub.com/more Christopher. That's astrologyhub.com/more Christopher to gain access to exclusive episodes every week. Now, let's go ahead and talk about Pluto retrograding back down into Capricorn. Now, I would imagine most of you out there are like, what? I thought Pluto left Capricorn and entered Aquarius. I thought we were done with Pluto being in the zodiac sign of Capricorn. Not so fast. Modern planets in particular have this habit of sort of like entering a sign, stopping, thinking about it, turning around, going back into the sign that they just left, stopping, thinking about it, deciding, okay, let's go ahead with this, and then resuming and going into the next sign. They have a tendency to sort of like tarry at the threshold. And this is exactly what's happening with Pluto on September 1st. So what we have going on here is Pluto is retrograding back down into the zodiac sign of Capricorn, a zodiac sign where Pluto has been since 2008. Now, in astrology, Pluto is the planet of ordeals and the transformations that arise from them. What that means is that you have to go through an ordeal in order to trigger the transformation that's going to take place, a transformation that usually transforms you entirely from head to toe. But these aren't the sort of transformations like, I don't know, the sailor soldiers do in Sailor Moon, where they say, moon power, make up, and they're suddenly transformed into a sailor sensi. No, these transformations are very long and involved, and they take place over a very long period of time. They take place as Pluto transits a zodiac sign. When you do the math that Pluto entered Capricorn in 2008 and that it left in 2024, you know that Pluto has been in Capricorn roughly about 16 years. So you've had 16 years of a transformation unfolding. Now, let me share with you a little background on the planet Pluto. Pluto is the last of the three modern planets to join the astrological pantheon. A modern planet refers to a planet that was discovered after the year 1781, what we pretty much reference as the modern age. In 1781, the planet Uranus, the planet of revolution and change, was discovered. In 1846, the planet Neptune, the planet of illusion and vision, was discovered. And finally, in 1930, at the midpoint between the beginning of World War I and the end of World War II, came the discovery of Pluto. These are the modern planets. And each of these planets rules over a domain. Uranus rules over the heaven. Indeed, Uranus in Greek means heavenly night or heavenly father. So all the constellations that we see in the nighttime sky, that we see in space, space is ruled by Uranus. Neptune rules over the oceans. And we all know that the ocean covers about 3/4 of the planet Earth. And so Neptune rules over our collective imagination and our dream and our vision of things. Neptune also is associated to the invisible realm, or the realm of spirits and phantoms. Those are all associated with Neptune. And then Pluto, finally. Pluto rules over the realm of the underworld. And Pluto is indeed named after the Roman god of the underworld, Pluton. So when we talk about the underworld, well, obviously we talk about things that are buried in the earth. And one of the things that might come to mind immediately might be a cemetery. Okay, when people die, people are buried in the earth. And indeed, Pluto is ruled over the Roman god of the dead. So that's part of, those are some of the attributes that are given to the planet Pluto. But Pluto also rules over things like seeds that are buried in the earth. You go and you plant a seed with the expectation that it's going to sprout in the spring and grow into a beautiful flower or bush or whatever have you. So Pluto rules over the dead, Pluto rules over seeds, and finally, Pluto rules over riches, gold, silver, precious metals, oil, all come from underneath the surface of the earth. So this is the realm, this is the region that Pluto rules over. How do we translate that into an astrological chart? One of the examples I like to use with Pluto comes from a phrase that the humanist astrologer Dane Rudhyar used. And Dane Rudhyar would often talk about a seed self. Dane Rudhyar basically introduced Jungian psychology to astrology in his 1930s book, The Astrology of Personality. And Dane Rudhyar subscribed to the idea that an astrological chart was really a blueprint of the psyche, that it really held up a picture of your psychological components, that each of the planets were associated to an archetype that we could understand through mythology or we could understand through symbols. And each of these planets were working in collaboration with us towards the ultimate unfoldment of our lives, the ultimate unfoldment and expression and fulfillment of ourselves. Many astrologers, when interpreting an astrological chart, will begin with the sun. And that's because the sun represents the self. The sun represents the ego. The sun represents everything that I know about myself to be true. So the sun is also understood in terms of, do you feel seen? Do you feel recognized? These are all connected to the light of the sun that we see in the day. And so the sun sign will often describe characteristics of yourself that you can recognize pretty quickly are true about yourself. If you're Capricorn, you might be a bit slow. Things might take a long time in your life to unfold. If you're Gemini, you might be very quick and you think very fast on your feet. If you're born under Pisces, you're very emotional, very empathetic. These are attributes that, if they are connected to your sun sign, if someone said, oh, you're sensitive, or you have a tendency to be logical, you must be an Aquarius, you're going to be like, wow, yeah, no, that's true. Okay, so the sun sign will describe qualities that we can recognize pretty quickly as being who we are. So the sun can represent the ego in an astrological chart, and the sun is by its nature aspirational. The sun is always moving towards the future, like the sun rising on a new day. And so the sun will also describe the person that we are going to become one day. I want to be an astronaut, or I want to be an art historian, or I want to be a megalomaniac. Okay, I don't know if we choose to be megalomaniacs, but anyway, the sun sign will describe what we would love to become one day, what we think would be very fulfilling, what we think we're really good at, what we feel would be a true expression of who we are. And like the sun in the sky, life yearns for the sun. We plants grow towards it. If you've got flowers or plants in your home, you can see for yourself that when the sun is passing through the window or through that patch of sky that shines down on your backyard, that the flowers will sort of crane their stems and follow the sun as it goes across the sky. And we can be like that ourselves with the expression of our astrological chart. Pluto, you can sort of think of as being a buried sun. As Dane Rudhyar would say, a seed self. Pluto carries the seed of who we are. And this comes from a couple of different ideas. Certainly, a sperm, the male sperm, when it combines with the female egg, when it fertilizes the female egg, starts life. It starts a fetus that will become a child, and that will become you, all right? So the sperm carries within it DNA, and it carries the DNA of the father, and it swims towards the egg, and it fertilizes, and then you have this combination of father and mother. So the seed of life, which we refer to as a sperm, comes from the Greek word sperma, which literally means seed. So Pluto, in essence, rules over DNA and everything else that is passed down through the generations, whether that's inherited characteristics, intergenerational wealth, or intergenerational trauma. All of these are carried down through the generations by the planet Pluto, and that is what Pluto symbolizes in an astrological chart. It symbolizes the seed. If you think of yourself as a plant, you were seeded, you started to grow, you started to sprout, you burst through the ground or you break through the ground and you move towards the light and you grow in all sorts of different ways and in all sorts of different directions. So that's what Pluto represents in your astrological chart. Pluto is indeed like the sun. You can even think of Pluto as a buried sun. There's the sun in the sky, what we aspire to be and what we grow towards. And then there's the sun within the planet Earth, or there is the sun within ourselves. And this references the Earth's core. I don't know if you know this or not, but the Earth's core is as hot as the surface of the sun. It burns at 10,800 degrees Fahrenheit. So you can think of Pluto, as I said before, as a buried sun. It's a counterpart to the sun in the sky, and it carries within yourself, it carries within your chart, your seed self, and your truest self. So the sun in an astrological chart, which is high in the sky and it burns bright, the sun represents the ego. It represents everything you know about yourself to be true. It represents growing to become the best you that you can possibly be. That's the sun, something that would be recognizable to other people and recognizable to yourself. Pluto symbolizes the ego you don't know about yourself. Okay, it's the seed. It's the seed buried down deep inside of you. When we look at flowers or plants, we don't think of the seeds. We look at the flower and the plant. But the flower in the plant is rooted and grows from a seed, and that's what Pluto is in the chart. So where the sun goes looking for itself, like in the future or out in the world, Pluto demands that you descend down into the depths of yourself in order to call upon who you are. Okay, so where the sun is like a seed growing through the earth and looking for the sun and flourishing, Pluto demands that you go down into yourself and you basically awaken parts of yourself that you didn't really know existed, but when they are awakened, that feel familiar just the same. So Pluto is always this stranger in a chart, but it's a familiar stranger. It's someone that you know, that when Pluto emerges, it's not what you would have expected. It's not the way you sort of saw yourself, but you know it's true. I think the closest way we have of describing that is, you know, when we register the truth of something because we feel it in our gut. Okay, we feel it in our Pluto place. We recognize that this is a true thing. Pluto is the planet of ordeals and the transformations in astrology. And what I mean by ordeals is that when Pluto is, for instance, traveling through your zodiac sign, you will go through hardships. Okay, all of a sudden, the things that used to make sense, the things that felt familiar to you in your world don't make sense in the way that they used to. They don't feel secure. They don't feel like they're going to last forever. Suddenly, everything feels very perishable. And there can be a great anxiety that sort of shows up when Pluto is traveling through your zodiac sign. Saturn, we know, is the planet of tests, trials, and tribulations. And when we face a Saturn transit, we go through something that's a little similar. Things that used to come easily no longer do when you're going through a Saturn transit, because Saturn is withholding from you. And so what is your response to something being withheld from you? Is it like, I'm not going to try, or I'm going to give up, or, ooh, you're evil to withhold this thing from me? Like, do we get angry and frustrated, or do we get despairing and despondent? And Saturn will just continue to withhold something, and you decide whether you're going to give up and you're not going to play this game, and that's an exercise in futility, or if you're going to really rise to the occasion, if you're really going to tackle that obstacle or that test. So that's how Saturn basically builds builds an ability to face an obstacle and to clamber over it, to solve the problem, to take care of something that needed taking care of. That's how Saturn works. It works by withholding. Pluto works by making you descend down into yourself. Usually that can go through loss. A lot of times it can go through loss. Usually it can be associated to a traumatic experience, something happening to you that causes great pain and great sorrow. Sometimes it can come from a sudden realization that you don't fit in with your world anymore, that this career or these friends or where you are, something has come into your life that has separated you from them. That can sometimes be physical, but it can also be psychological, where all of a sudden you don't feel connection here anymore, and you feel a call to descend down into yourself. So where solar journeys tend to be away from oneself, going out into the world, whether that's, leaving the nest and going out in the world, or leaving your country or culture, going out in the world. These are solar adventures. Pluto is going down into yourself, okay? Going down into yourself and reconnecting with parts of yourself that you have no idea, okay, of what they are or what you're even looking for. With the Pluto in Capricorn since 2008, and it left and entered Aquarius this year, January 2024, this might have been in some regards an ancestral journey, of reconnecting to ancestor or reconnecting to an ancestor's story that was a generation or maybe even 3 generations old. And so that can also be a kind of descent down into the underworld. But the ordeal, more often than not, comes through loss. It's not something that you choose. It's something that happens, and you might turn to the familiar answers or try to resurrect your expectations, and they just aren't going to work. They just don't fit the occasion. Okay, so it can be associated to a trauma or disastrous or catastrophe, and you go into yourself to call upon parts of yourself, to meet parts of yourself that you didn't even know existed. What you find inside is a different kind of strength than the one that we're used to in our solar world. And when I talk about a solar world, that's a lit world. That's a world in which you can see things and you have conversations with people, and it's the world where we mostly live our life. The dark world, the lower depths, are not seen, and they're not familiar, and they're not understood. In the light world, we have phrases like, believe in yourself, or be the best you that you can be, or here's my authentic self, or it may even be faith in God, or faith in government institutions, or rule of law. Okay, these are the things that order our world, that they guide our world. Believe in company of people. Believe in love of a lover, love of friends, believe in society. These are the things that we see and that we enjoy and traffic in every day of our lives. When you travel into the lower depths, you are immediately apart from all of those things. The world of the light doesn't correspond or relate here. And it can be a very intense and a very isolating experience, ordeals. Pluto, its fundamental strength is the strength of survival, all right? So Pluto gives us a will to live, or Pluto can give us a will to live that we didn't even know we had and might not even be connected to will itself. I don't know if you've ever had friends or associates who have passed away or have been who've struggled with an illness. There are some people in which they're like, I vow to fight this. I will not be defeated by this illness, and they may die very quickly despite, their insistence, their fight, their faith. There are other people who may face an illness who don't really, they're not into fighting it at all, or they're just going to, go through the treatment or whatever, and somehow they survive it. They just survive. There's something about themselves that keeps persevering no matter what. Sometimes you even hear some people who've been ill for long periods of time say, why can't I just pass away? Why can't I just die? Why do I keep living or keep going? That's Pluto. Pluto keeps going more than maybe you even wanted to keep going. Pluto keeps persevering. Pluto keeps surviving. Other planets are curators of our aspirations and dreams. Other planets talk about our yearning to be with someone, or to live in a good society, or to find a wonderful plot of earth. Pluto is that blind perseverance, that blind fortitude that keeps going more than we think that we are capable of, and may not even be connected to the way that we appraise ourselves. These aspects of ourself are unlocked during the ordeals that we suffer through with a Pluto transit. We may go into a catacomb of depression. We may be rendered inert. Seeds can be rendered inert. Seeds don't always grow through the earth like on clockwork. There are seeds that can be buried and remain buried for months, for years, for decades, and then suddenly spring to life. Pluto's like that. We can't call upon it. We can't summon it. We can feel its presence, and that's what it will give us, but it does it in its own time. So we can go through a period of darkness or of pain or of trauma, and it can feel unending, but yet there's still something that pushes us through. There's still something that pushes through the soil to reach the sun and to live. And this is Pluto's chief mission in an astrological chart. Yet Pluto always rewards those who brave its trials. Now, that reward isn't a pat on the head like you would give to a Labrador retriever when it brings back the ball that you threw. That's not what Pluto does. Pluto rewards you through experience. You've gone through its ordeal. You know that you're moving to the other side of it. And as a result, you also feel reborn and reconnected. This is what makes the Plutonian experience singular. Reborn in that you're not that person you were at the beginning of the Pluto transit, and reconnected because you connected to something deep inside of you that you didn't even know was there. This gives a confidence, a centeredness, a richness of experience. Your roots are drawing from experience. It gives a knowingness, okay? You just know on the other side of this. And so that can be the reward. In some occasions, Pluto can reward ordeals through material riches and wealth. Pluto is associated to material riches and wealth. Pluto can reward that and has done that in several horoscopes. And another sort of reward that Pluto can bestow is that confidence of experience, of having gone through what you've gone through. And something, interestingly enough, you can immediately recognize in other people who have experienced it as well. Other people maybe who have experienced loss, or who have experienced grief, or who have experienced losing everything that they had. There's a kind of fraternity with those who get it. It's kind of the group of people who gets it, no matter your walk of life, your different culture, the different country or religion that you practice. There's a community of getting it, which is this kind of Plutonian community. So rebirth is you are no longer who you were before. This isn't based on realization, like I'm jaded or I'm enlightened or something like that. You feel it in your gut. You feel it in your entire being. And that's what you move forward with. When Pluto retrogrades back down into a sign after it's left it, this doesn't mean here comes round two, and it doesn't mean like, you thought you killed Freddy Krueger on your Nightmare of Elm Street, and oh no, out of the flames, Freddy Krueger is coming for us again. No, that's not what Pluto retrograding back down into a sign is going to be. Pluto retrograding back down into a sign is kind of checking out how you doing with this. Okay, you've gone through ordeal. You've been transformed by this experience. You have reconnected to a self that you didn't really always recognize, but you knew was right or familiar to you. You've been reborn. You're entering the world again from this place. And how are you doing with it? Are you committed to living out of your reborn self? Or do you feel like you don't understand where you are? Do you feel like you're not certain about the future? And do you feel like maybe you want to go back to where you were before because it was more familiar, it was more safe, or it was more secure? So Pluto is kind of checking in to see how that transformation, how you're wearing that transformation, how that transformation fits. Think of a butterfly. Butterflies are often used with the idea of transformation. Butterflies are also connected to the soul. A butterfly is originally a caterpillar, which is earth-based. It feeds on plants and things like this. It forms a cocoon where it undergoes this transformation. Now, even, if you took a science class when you were in the third grade, you would watch the transformation and the butterfly would free itself and the wings would open up and that looked lovely. But do we really know what the physical experience of a butterfly transforming is? We regard it as something lovely and wonderful and poetic, but maybe it's really painful. Maybe the wings pulling themselves out of the caterpillar body and the legs extending, maybe that hurts. Maybe that hurts a lot. Maybe that cocoon is actually either an arena where they're feeling this, or it's a limbo place where they might be blessedly inert or unconscious. We don't know. But when the butterfly opens up its wings and it's reborn, it's a whole new world as far as the butterfly is concerned. And that's what's going on at the end of a Pluto transit. So this stepping back down into Capricorn is kind of Pluto checking to see, how you doing with this? Are you okay with this? Do you need to make some readjustments or something along those lines? Do you need some reassurance? Do you need some support before I move on to the next zodiac sign? Okay, so that's how I want you to think of Pluto retrograding back down into Capricorn. As I mentioned before, Pluto retrogrades back down into the zodiac sign of Capricorn on September 1st. It turns direct at 29 degrees Capricorn on October 11th, and then it re-enters the zodiac sign of Aquarius on November 19th. So that's the period of time that I'm talking about here, with Pluto being back in the zodiac sign of Capricorn. What I wanted to do, if I may, is just go through the 12 signs and talk about what maybe the headspace is right now with each of the 12 signs in regards to Pluto retrograding back down into the zodiac sign of Capricorn.
Hey there, it's Amanda here, and I'll make this super quick so you can get right back to Christopher. But I'd like to offer you a free gift to accompany this episode. Now, you probably already know this, but Mercury is not the only planet that goes retrograde. All planets have a retrograde period, and that retrograde period carries a specific signature. To help you learn more about planetary retrogrades, we created a free downloadable PDF. All you have to do is go to astrologyhub.com/retrogrades to get your free copy now, or we'll drop the link to that in the show notes. Now, back to the episode.
If you're an Aries sun or have Aries rising, the big question you may be facing with Pluto retrograding back down to the zodiac sign of Capricorn is, what kind of authority are you? Since 2008, you've dealt with the issue of authority, either being on the wrong side of an authority, losing an authority figure in your life, or having difficulty assuming the mantle of authority. Aries is often portrayed as being a leader in astrology, which I find curious because many people born under Aries that I've read for are very uncomfortable with a leadership position. They may be out in front because Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, and so it wants to be first. But being first doesn't necessarily mean you're a leader. You could be in the lead, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're a leader. And this is something that Aries has been grappling with Pluto entering the zodiac sign of Capricorn and residing in that sign since 2008. So now that it's completed its journey, you may find yourself being an authority in your life. You may actually have an authority position, or you may have authority because you're a parent, or you may have authority because you're head of the bowling league. You know, people are looking up to you. And so the question is, what kind of an authority are you? Are you severe and tough? Or are you fatherly in the best sense of the term? The reason I pose it as fatherly is because Aries and Capricorn are two zodiac signs that are very intricately connected to the father. And so you can have fathers who are severe and tough. Aries, which I often will refer to as coach dad, can be tough because Aries wants the best for you. And so, you know, if you've done 50 push-ups as an Aries, you may say, okay, you know, give me 50 more, you know. So Aries is always sort of raising the bar, getting people to go further than they thought they could go before. The difference with Capricorn is that Capricorn is more of a disciplinarian. Capricorn expresses authority by testing people, testing to see if you know enough to graduate to the next level, if you know what you're doing on the job. And so Pluto might have brought out that kind of severity and that kind of toughness in you. It also might have brought out a recognition that you didn't have to be tough or severe in that way. That you didn't like it yourself, so why are you doing it with someone else? Or you may have begun to see that it's counterproductive, that people don't really respond to it. And so as an Aries, you're learning a different kind of strength, that perhaps if you talk to people or work with people in a more encouraging and supportive way, that you're going to get better results than by cracking the whip and giving them a hard time. So with Pluto retrograding back down into Capricorn, you may be faced with a situation in which your authority may be questioned, and you might be sort of tempted to go back to the old you, the severe and tough you. And so during this period of time, you're going to hold these two different ideas of yourself in your mind's eye. Do you go back to the severe and tough you, or do you move forward to the warm, fatherly you? You know, who shows people how to do it, who gives them the encouragement, who doesn't withhold the support, but, you know, is maybe doing the push-ups with them, you know. And so this may be something that you're facing during this period of time that Pluto is retrograding in Capricorn, and where you will judge for yourself whether this works with you or not. If you have a Taurus sun or Taurus rising, Pluto in Capricorn is a trining energy. That means it's a supportive and nurturing energy. It gives you more of what you need. It's very facilitating, and it's very protective at the same time. And this is something that, as a Taurus, you've needed. Okay. In 2018, Uranus, the planet of revolution and change, entered your zodiac sign. And since 2018, you've seen a lot of the mainstays in your life turned upside down or inside out. You've gone through a lot of changes, not changes that you chose for yourself, but changes that were imposed on you. Some of these changes might have felt like the rug being pulled out from under you. And some of these changes might have felt like getting, seltzer sprayed in your face. Okay, there have been lots of reversals and rude awakenings. Even though Uranus and Pluto weren't trining by exact degrees, you still had planets that were passing over Uranus and then going to Pluto. So trines were being created between these two planets, whether by the moon or Mars or Jupiter, something along those lines. What I mean to say is that Pluto has been there to support moving you forward through the revolutionary changes and the radical upsets that Uranus can bring. Remember when I was talking earlier about the perseverance that Pluto can bestow? That perseverance has been there for you at times where you felt like giving up, or times in which it's like, I don't know what more I can do. I mean, I have to give up because there's nothing to work with anymore here. Pluto would have kept pushing you forward, pushing you out of the soil and into the light of day where you can flourish. And as a result, you've discovered strengths and resources you didn't know you had, and you've learned to make something of them. That can be, making something of something, going belly up or failing or being a disaster, or making something of a catastrophe. What that puts me in mind of immediately is this amazing art exhibit that I went to when I was visiting Santa Fe, New Mexico. It's in their folklore museum. And there was a traveling exhibit of artwork done by Ukrainians in the time of war. They had taken shells, rocket shells or bullet casings, and they had created out of it jewelry or traditional icons or reinterpretation of saints in contemporary war gear. One was a footage of a fellow who was in a trench. Okay, he's in a trench because he's fighting at war. But during the time that they were waiting for things to happen, he was sculpting out of the earth this extraordinary mural, and it was so powerful. I mean, to see people taking shrapnel, taking, the things that happen in war, the things that litter your streets and destroy your homes, to take it and create art out of it. There are no words for it. It's a religious experience. It moves you in profound ways. I use this as an example with you, Tauruses, that you may have experienced things in which things had fallen apart, you didn't know what to do, but there was still this perseverance of Pluto, this insistence that you make something of your life, that you get through whatever catastrophe or crisis that you were facing. And so with Pluto having entered Aquarius at the beginning of the year, that might have signaled in the weeks leading up to January of 2024, you emerging on the other side of it. So with Pluto retrograding back down into Capricorn, it's checking in to see how you're doing with that. People who come back from traumatic experiences aren't always making the easiest transition back into society. If you've seen your life torn inside out and upside down, how are you doing with, now that you've made it to the other side where you can perhaps feel the ground underneath your feet again? How are you dealing with that? And so that's what Pluto retrograding back down into Capricorn is going to be for you. I would imagine it's going to be a reassuring experience, a comforting experience, and one in which you might not have the guarantees, but one in which you can feel in your gut is right as you prepare to continue with your evolutionary journey. For people who are born under Gemini or who have Gemini rising, Pluto in Capricorn has been a bit of a weird experience. That's because Gemini forms what we call in astrology a quincunx to the zodiac sign of Capricorn. It doesn't really get Capricorn. Quincunxes aren't conjunctions, they aren't oppositions, they aren't squares, they aren't trines, they're not sextiles. These are the Ptolemaic aspects that talk about relationship. These are the Ptolemaic aspects that, whether you're yelling at each other or terribly in love with one another, you're in some kind of relationship with one another. It can either be loving or antagonistic. That's still a relationship. A quincunx means that you just don't fit, that the pieces just don't come together here. Being a Gemini, you might not have really understood what was being asked of you. You might not have really understood in these years that Pluto was in Capricorn. You might not have gotten the whole authority thing. Like, what does that mean? I mean, if you're an authority, does that mean you're a stuffed shirt? If you're an authority, does that mean you get to tell people what to do or you get bossy? If you're an authority, does that mean like you're stuck in one situation and who wants to be that? I mean, so you might not have really understood the authority thing. I liken it to a teenager. Maybe it's a teenager who's arguing with their parents. They're saying something like, I'm 16 and I'm old enough to drive, so I'm an adult now. Or I'm 18 and I'm old enough to vote, so I'm an adult now. And the parent may be like, well, you may be able to drive, but you don't own your own car, or you may be able to vote, but are you exercising that right, or are you even informed? So there can kind of be this idea of putting on an authority, but not really getting what being an authority is. When we're talking about a Capricorn, you're always talking about authority. And you're talking about Pluto and Capricorn, you're talking about an established authority. So as a Gemini during this period of time, you might have, put on authority, but it didn't sit right. Or you might have just resisted authority, like gotten annoyed with authority because it was just so old hat or repressive or oppressive or retrograde or even backward. So when Pluto entered Aquarius at the beginning of 2024, Aquarius is an air sign, Gemini is an air sign, so there was a trine. And that might have been when you sort of like got it, when you're kind of like, oh, yeah, that's what an authority does. It might even have been a moment in which it's like, oh, yeah, that's what my mom was talking about. Or, oh, yeah, that's what dad meant. It could be like, now that you've got your own kid, it might be like, oh, yeah, that's what mom was talking about with like, pick up after yourself. Like you can even feel yourself or hear yourself saying it. Or you might be a disciplinarian and you're like, oh my God, I'm just like dad. So this might be what happened when Pluto entered Aquarius at the beginning of the year, that you understood maybe for the first time really what your parents' experience was and why your parents were acting the way that they did, because now this is happening to you. With Pluto retrograding back down into Capricorn, you may lose that kind of realization, or you may lose the momentum of that realization, the exhilaration of enlightenment, of understanding something. And you might find yourself kind of reverting, back to I'm 16 and I can drive, and I'm 18 and I can vote, and I'm an adult. You might find yourself reverting back to that. And so this period of time is going to remind you that's not you anymore. You getting why mom did the things you did, or you getting why dad was the disciplinarian, doesn't mean you're going to do what they did, but you get where it was coming from. That's going to be the thing that you reconnect with so that when Pluto re-enters Aquarius on November 17th, you're wearing that authority comfortably, and not dressing yourself up in authority's clothes in hopes that it will somehow pass you off as being an authority. You'll get it, but not only will you get it, you'll wear it really gracefully. You'll wear those butterfly wings gracefully and like you were born to them all along. If you're a Cancer sun or you have Cancer rising, then Pluto and Capricorn had a very strong impact on your relationships. You may have had one relationship this whole time from 2008 to this year, or you might have had a couple or a few relationships during this period of time. But romantic partner relationships aren't the only ones that I'm talking about. There can also be domestic or familial home relationships. And so I don't know if you're familiar with this phrase, you can't go home again. There's actually, I think, a very famous book that became a play that was based on that. It's the idea that, you can't go back to your home. You can't, go down nostalgia lane and expect everything to have been what it was before. And it's something that we'll all be like, oh, yeah, no, I get it, and maybe even like, that's so sentimental, or whatever. That's ridiculous. Of course, you can't go home again. That's just a physical reality. Well, just because we tell ourselves that, or just because we accept that it's a physical reality, for instance, you can't squeeze into the clothes you wore when you were a 5-year-old. Okay, you can't go home again in that sense, all right? But that doesn't mean that never stops being an emotional realization, okay? And so with Pluto moving back into Capricorn, where it was opposing your zodiac sign, there's this feeling that something is out of reach. You can see it, but it's beyond reach. And Cancer being associated to home, hearth, and family, mother, tradition, and roots, there can be a very sobering realization that you can't go home again. And that's something that you might have really experienced in the last couple of years, certainly in the months and weeks leading up to January of 2024. And that might have been a psychological shift, or it might have been a physical experience as well. So with Pluto having moved into Aquarius, there was this feeling that you were moving into the future. Pluto in Capricorn is, as I was saying earlier, ancestral. It can be ancestral knowledge or wanting to research your ancestry. But it's this feeling like in my past history is wisdom that I can use right now or find security in. When Pluto moves into Aquarius, which is a very future-oriented zodiac sign, indeed, Aquarians are all about the future, that might have sat a little uncomfortably with your Cancerianness, okay? You might have been resistant to future movement, and maybe even insistent on the past, or you may have moved into this future path, but you didn't really know how to navigate it. You really didn't know how to work with it. And so the Pluto moving back into Capricorn is taking you back home. It's actually kind of granting you your wish. It's kind of saying, well, let's try coming back home again. Let's try stepping into that pool again. Let's try putting on that jersey we wore as a 5-year-old again, and then it'll be like, oh, it still doesn't fit, or, it's great being with all of you, but I don't really feel connected to you in the way that I did before. But this time with Pluto's retrograde, it's not going to be disillusioning. It's not going to be, sort of like the end of a Tennessee Williams play where it's like, I've lost my illusions and now what do I have? Nothing. Okay, it's going to be more affirming. It's going to be more an opportunity to say, I love you people, or I love you. You'll always be my family. You'll always be my roots, where I came from. But I also see how I need to be moving ahead right now. I need to be moving away. I need to be moving down a path that's different from the one that I was on before. And so that kind of reassurance that letting you go back home again so you can come to the realization yourself emotionally and psychologically that you can't go home again and that this doesn't have to be a bad or dispiriting thing. This is, I think, is the great gift of Pluto retrograding back down into Capricorn. So that when it re-enters Aquarius again in November, Aquarius still may require some making sense of, but you're going to be more game for it. You're going to be more in the headspace, more in the heart space to deal with that. And I think that you will find your resolve to be renewed and your perseverance to be fortified for this next chapter in your life. If you're Leo or Leo rising, Pluto retrograding back down into Capricorn is going to be an interesting experience. There's some similarity to Aries, because Aries is one of the 3 zodiac signs associated to the father, and the other zodiac sign that's associated to the father is Leo. Capricorn is the 3rd zodiac sign that's associated to the father. So Aries is basically, in a nutshell, coach dad. It's the dad that wants you to do really, really well, and that when you do 50 push-ups says, give me 50 more, Leo is the good father. That's because of its association with summer, the season of abundance here in the Northern Hemisphere. So Leo is the father who is protective and recognizes you for who you are and sort of shows you the ways of the world, and has your back, So even if you're Leo and that's not what your father was like at all, it might even be the furthest thing from, you were born with the conviction that that's how your father should have been. Okay. And that's what a good father is. That's what a good parent is. And Leo is a parental sign, as is Cancer. So what's Capricorn? Capricorn is called the dark father. Leo's the good father because it's associated with summer, the season of abundance, when days are long and nights are short. Capricorn is the dark father because it's associated to the time of year when days are short and nights are long. And so Capricorn can be associated to a father who struggled with handicaps or problems or obstacles that clipped his wings, that compromised him in a way that maybe perhaps didn't allow him to fulfill himself or to realize his dreams. Or it can describe a father who was very severe, very austere, very remote, wintry, a father who perhaps wasn't around, a father whom you could never please. With this quincunx, because that's the relationship that's being formed here between the Sun and Leo and the Pluto and Capricorn, with this quincunx, you have trying to understand a father, but not really getting it. Okay. Being a Leo, you're going to insist this is the way your father should have been if he was bad, and you're not going to be like that. And you're going to be a good father. You're going to be warm and lit and luminous and encouraging. But the Pluto and Capricorn since 2008 might have made that difficult. Okay. You might have had a plan of what kind of father you're going to be, what kind of person you're going to be, very optimistic, upbeat. And you might have found yourself having difficulty trying to make that happen. There might have been authority figures that you bonded with, but they didn't stay in your life very long, or you never found the right mentor or authority figure, or you might have had some very disillusioning experiences with your own father during this period of time. Wow, he was really great until the age of 8, but boy, what a creep. Or even a realization of dad did the best that dad could do. Like, I was always disappointed in my father, but now I'm seeing what his tribulations and travails were. And I have feeling for that. I have sympathy for that. At the beginning of the year, Pluto formed an opposition to the Sun in Leo. And that opposition will remain for a period of time. And what it's set up here is me and other people type of thing. A negative understanding of that would be me against the world type of thing. Another understanding of that would be finding your place in society, finding your place in a group of people, finding where you shine. And that Pluto might, and maybe you shined in a particular way, but now you don't shine in that same way like you used to. And you're trying to like connect and find what that is. Pluto returning back down into Capricorn and bringing up the idea of father again, parent again, authority again. It's kind of like going and rereading a chapter in a book. You know, you've been following the story and this is where you are, but you've gotten to a place in the book where it's like, wait, who was, Aunt Beverly again? And who was cousin Justin? And so you go back to the book and you're, oh, that's Aunt Beverly. That's cousin Justin. Okay, no, now I get it. And so it's what a Pluto retrograde in Capricorn does. It allows you to sort of touch base with that authority conversation you were having, that struggle to understand, but you weren't really quite understanding that you were having. And so that's going to allow you to reconnect to the authority in you, or connect to the authority in you that's different from what your understanding of authority was back in 2008, 2009. You may still be carrying those 2008, 2009 understandings, but this Pluto back in Capricorn is kind of bringing you up to date with what that means now. And so that can actually be a very revelatory experience. And it may be an experience where you understand really concretely what didn't work, what wasn't working, what more you needed to do. And you can identify what those things are. And you can sort of put them out there in front of you again. And you can follow that. You may be going through a period of time also where you've really had to draw upon yourself. And that may also be what's going on right now. But where I sort of see this going is you moving into a relationship with yourself that's much more comfortable than it used to be. You moving into a relationship with yourself that's going to feel more organic. You're going to have a really solid sense of who you are when Pluto re-enters Aquarius. And you're not going to feel so much, me against the world as like, I need to be in my corner, and I need to be standing up for who I am, or I need to be true to who I am. And that is something I shouldn't be doubting. And that is something that I should not be altering as I enter into this new chapter of my life. And that will be re-engaged again quite robustly when Pluto re-enters Aquarius on November 19th. If you're born under Virgo or you have Virgo rising, this Pluto retrograde back down into Capricorn is going to be very reaffirming. All right. It puts me in mind of when a kid has gone off to college and they're having a hard time in college. They're trying to get down the whole dorm room thing and the classes and the courses and all these sorts of things. And, with that first break from college, they come back home and they go visit their high school and they sit down and have a chat with their high school teacher. Okay, this is how I would paint or depict Pluto retrograding back down into Capricorn for you. You've gone off and tried something. You've gone off, you've graduated high school, you've gone into a whole different environment. You thought you had it all together and you realized that you didn't, and that it was very overwhelming. And now you're coming back to someone who was like your guide, your counselor, someone who really understands you. And it allows you to have a very different conversation than you would with your teacher had you still been in high school. Now that you've been out in the world, you can come back and talk to your teacher as almost a contemporary. The teacher is still more mature than you, older than you, but you can talk to the teacher as an adult rather than a student. And this allows a lot of wonderful information to be imparted. Now, I'm not saying to all you Virgos out there, go look up your old high school teacher, or I don't know, maybe you should, maybe, it would be a wonderful thing, but there may be other people in your life who fulfill that role. Maybe it's a boss that you used to work for. Maybe it was someone that you collaborated with on a project. Maybe it's an old colleague, someone who knew you in a certain capacity in your life. And now that you're really becoming an authority figure in your life right now, that you can kind of circle back and have a talk to. Uranus, the planet of revolution and change, entered the zodiac sign of Taurus in 2018. That was a very stimulating period for people born under Virgo or Virgo rising. But that Uranus was in Taurus, which was an earth sign, Pluto was in Capricorn, an earth sign, that kind of created a very loose trine. And instead of that Uranian energy being revolutionary and upsetting, you were actually able to make sense of it because of the trine to Pluto in the zodiac sign of Capricorn. But Saturn has been opposite your sign for about, I think it's a year and a half. We're coming up on 2 years at this point. And Saturn opposite your sign has made you struggle with what it's like to be in a position of authority. That position maybe you're a manager, a supervisor, maybe you're a CEO, maybe you're a parent, maybe you're the driver of the school bus, and so you're responsible for all the kids on the bus, but you're in a position of authority and you're wondering if you're wearing it well. Virgos don't really like positions of authority. They're the experts on things. You can ask in Virgo how to do something, and they're the expert on it. Virgo is a sign that really cultivates a particular expertise in their life. But an expert isn't really an authority. And this is what you find yourself struggling with. You may be constantly questioning your authority, or maybe people question your authority and then you get angry and defensive and don't act in an authority way. You maybe become authoritarian by, laying down the law and having no patience or something like that. Or you may find that if someone questions your authority, you have a tendency to withdraw, to withdraw the approval, to withdraw the support so that you can communicate to them an icy disapproval. And that's not really an authority either. So you may, during this period of time, when Pluto's back in Capricorn, you may look up someone like a mentor, someone who knew you well then, and just sort of like talk about what you're facing right now and maybe share your reservations and your anxieties. And, sometimes Pluto can deliver what we've wanted. I want to be at the top of my game. I want success. I want to be good at things, but we don't always understand what success means. There's this moment. I have this show that I'm absolutely obsessed with. It's called The Bear. And in season 1, it's basically about an international chef who comes back, takes over the family business of a sandwich store, decides it's not going to work, guts it, and wants to repurpose it as a upscale restaurant. But in the first couple of episodes, he's trying to rally together the staff of this restaurant who are kind of begrudging, but they eventually follow his lead. But at one point they get a review and the restaurant becomes incredibly successful. All these orders pour in. And in other words, orders are coming in and the thing that they come in is spitting out paper and they can't keep up with the order and the wheels fall off the car. That can happen with success. You can work really, really hard and then you're there and then all of a sudden it's overwhelming. It's too much. You can't keep up with it. And so this may also be something where you're touching base with someone who's been there, done that, and who knows you really well and can help center you with where you are and give advice, maybe help you to explore alternatives or choices during this period of time. So I see the Pluto retrograde back down into Capricorn as being very supportive and also being very guiding. So that when it re-enters Aquarius on November 17th, you're going to have a clear idea of what the road ahead looks like. Libra, as we all know, is the zodiac sign of partnership in astrology. Libras love to pair up with someone. It can be a spouse, it can be a lover, it can be a spouse and a lover, It could be a best friend. Libras are essentially always marrying themselves off to someone. And that doesn't have to just be like the sacrament of marriage. It's just the spouse is as important to them as the dog walker is important to them. They're always forming these partnerships. And Libras put themselves in charge of the partnership. They put themselves in charge of the relationship. And what can happen is that Libras can, over a period of time, identify with the partnership, and they can lose themselves in the process. There's an expectation with a Libra, whether it's a marriage or a business partnership. There's you, there's me, and then there's this relationship, this marriage, this collaboration, this partnership. So it's made up of three parts. Now, Pluto in Capricorn really challenged that. Pluto in Capricorn might even have brought about a period in your life in which you weren't in a partnership at all. And all you did was maybe long or yearn for being in a partnership. And maybe you got used to that idea and maybe accepted, okay, I'm just not going to partner with someone. I mean, that might not be what's going to happen. Or maybe you went through a slew of relationships that just didn't really work for you. Pluto in Capricorn was forming a square to your sign. And so that would have made partnerships very difficult, potentially combative, or very difficult to hold, very difficult to work with. All right. Or how it can also manifest is you're in a partnership, you're in a marriage, and you're going through difficult times together. And so that could either have stressed out the relationship, maybe even broken it, or brought the two of you together, but there was still a lot of difficulty that you were going through. And again, you might have lost connection with who you are. When Pluto entered the astrological sign of Aquarius at the beginning of this year, Aquarius is an air sign. Libra is an air sign. So this would have breathed new life into you. Okay. Now, automatically, it would have been like, oh, it's going to breathe new life into me and my partnership. But actually, because you're a sun in Libra, it breathed new life into you. All right. So what you might have noticed in recent months is that there has been a change of the balance of power in a relationship. If you were the more beholden one, you might be the one who's in the lead. If you were the one who was supportive, you might now be the one who's out in front. Okay, so there's a change in the balance of power of a partnership or a relationship. And this is a good thing, or at least many people might be saying this is a wonderful thing and applauding this in your life. But you yourself might be a bit unsure. There's always the exhilaration of enlightenment, the exhilaration of like, oh, I didn't know that I could do this before, and certainly Pluto and Aquarius may very well have brought that to you. But now with Pluto retrograding back down into Capricorn, you may be asking yourself, well, what's a relationship about, or what's a partnership about if I'm not the person who's supposed to maintain it? And what this retrograde back down into Capricorn may signal is there may be people in your life or circumstances in your life that are supporting you in taking the lead. Let's say it's a person you're talking to. This person might be saying, well, you've always been the brains of the outfit, so what's wrong with just going ahead and being the brains of the outfit right now? And you might be like, well, that's not okay, or what will people think? Or, like I have ambivalence or confusion or, anxiety about this. And what this Pluto in Capricorn is saying is you can't go back to who you were before. You can't just, go back to that. Or you might even try going back to it, but it doesn't fit. It's like a coat that, was really fabulous like 2 years ago and fit great, but now it doesn't fit, and now it's not so fabulous or fashionable. It doesn't sit right. You're not wearing those butterfly wings of metamorphosis, gracefully, those butterfly wings of transformation. So sometimes we learn a lot from what we can't do anymore. A lot of times we're taught that learning is something positive. You move into the future and you learn something new, a new skill or whatever, and this is great. It's very future oriented. But sometimes we learn, and especially in these can be Capricornian lessons, we learn because we can't do that anymore. Doing that isn't efficient. It doesn't work. It's not the way to do it anymore. And sometimes we have to try to do it that way a couple of times before that realization sinks in that it's just not going to work. And I think that that's a lot of what this Pluto in Capricorn is going to be. It's going to be really supporting you in being who you are, being more rooted in yourself, not relationship, more me-oriented than you-oriented. And it's going to make you even stand by what you want, but it's going to do it because you can't return to that anymore. It doesn't fit, it doesn't work with you anymore. And so you have to really step up to the plate. You have to be the person out in front of the curtain. You have to be the leader in the relationship, or the breadwinner, in the relationship. So that when Pluto re-enters Aquarius on November 17th, you'll have the signals you need to be having that take you forward and where you can show off your leadership abilities in a way that always eluded you before. For people born under Scorpio or who have Scorpio rising, Pluto retrograding back down into Capricorn is, dare I say it, going to be a lovely experience. The reason I say that it's going to be a lovely experience is because Scorpio naturally sextiles Capricorn. They're two old best friends who are reuniting and getting back together again. They're the ones who had the gallows humor that everyone, sort of distanced themselves from because they thought they were cynical or snide, but in reality, they had a delicious way of making fun, usually at someone else's expense and usually without those people ever knowing it. So there's a sardonic humor quality between Scorpio and Capricorn. Pluto is also your modern ruling planet. So Pluto in Capricorn is simpatico. It's something that you understand. Now, has Scorpio been ordeal-free, during that period of time that Pluto was in Capricorn? No, not at all. But as Scorpio has undergone the ordeals, the triumphs and the setbacks, there was always a sense of being supported in your life path and being supported in the way that you were moving forward. And Scorpio is a zodiac sign that can be connected to outrage a lot. Outrage because it's been rejected, outrage because it's been hurt. The other water signs, if they're hurt, they're like, I'm hurt, I feel bad. Scorpio's like retaliating, so Scorpio gets back up and it will fight, it will sting, it will retaliate. It's not going to give in to sensitivity or sentimentality. That's because Scorpio's traditional ruler is Mars. Mars fights back. Mars may not start the fight, but Mars will certainly end it. And Scorpios are famous for ending fights. But during this period that Pluto's been in Capricorn, and particularly in the last couple of years, there may have been a softening taking place for Scorpios. This might have been aided and abetted by the trine to Saturn in the zodiac sign of Pisces. Scorpios always felt as long as they were angry, they were tough, and they were strong. The big fear sometimes with Scorpio is giving into emotion, giving into the softness of emotion. The water signs, Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces, have a natural empathy. They have a natural sympathy. They can imagine the feeling the way that the other person feels. Even someone who's hostile, they will ask themselves, I wonder what made this person this way, or there must be a reason why this person is like this. Where other people might be like, oh, that's a hostile person, they're evil, stay away. The water signs are kind of like, was it a rough childhood? Was it a broken heart? There's a natural sympathy. Scorpios have that too, but being Mars ruled, the Mars will shut it down. Okay, the Mars will say, do not soften your stance. Do not let that culprit, that wrongdoer, that evildoer get away with it. Don't let them off the hook. Make sure that they are punished. Scorpio will go there, and they often do. So The transformation of Scorpio is actually a transformation into the confidence of the strength of love. Love for Scorpio is often meant passion. Okay, like I'm passionately in love with this person, or I'm obsessed with this, or I'm fixated on this. And so when you're obsessed with something, you can have a protective, guarding quality. I mean, it can sort of make you possessive and fixated, sure, but it brings out the more protective aspects of love, and the more treasuring aspects of love. It doesn't really strengthen the more gentle aspects of love. Pluto in Capricorn has brought that about. You've matured emotionally. You're not as likely to go dark. You're not as likely to mistrust everything that someone says. Maybe you've gained more humor. Maybe you've gained more compassion. When Pluto entered the zodiac sign of Aquarius, it really signaled a new life for you, a new world for you, where you were stepping over the threshold and coming out of that Capricorn, Scorpio infused darkness. Maybe you've spent the last few years kind of like, what we call during lockdown, isolated or protected at home. Scorpios, actually, with the lockdown, a lot of them had a great time because it was just like, I get to be with my things or my books or my, and sort of like away from the world. I mean, the water signs and some of the earth signs had a good time with that. They like being by themselves or in a very solitary space, to sort of restore, to refuel, or to go about and read those books or listen to those music and do the things that they wouldn't usually have been able to do because of the hectic pace of life. But Aquarius has been like, okay, here's your brave new world. It's like Miranda at the end of Shakespeare's The Tempest. Oh, brave new world and all the things in it. So, Aquarius has brought about your brave new world. And so Scorpio begrudgingly, has to step over the threshold into it. But what this Pluto in Capricorn is going to remind you is that you're not as sardonic or dark or resistant as you used to be. That, when you enter a brave new world, it's like a Scorpio entering a room of people where they don't know everyone. The inner defenses go up. And they're kind of like, they kind of like size up the group and, will be a little bit disdainful of people. But with Pluto moving into Capricorn, it's going to be in part, you can do this, Scorpio, you can enter into this new world. But Pluto entering Capricorn is also going to say, you don't have to be so tough on people. You don't have to be so cynical or suspicious. You've kind of moved beyond that. Lead with your sympathy and your empathy for others. Lead with a tremendous emotional intelligence that you've acquired in the past 10, 14 years. Lead with that. It's not going to let you down. Not only is it not going to let you down, it's going to enrich you tremendously as a person. And as a result, it will enrich all of your relationships, whether it's with a passing acquaintance or the love of your life. If you're born under Sagittarius or have Sagittarius rising, Pluto in Capricorn since the year 2008 has been hell on your finances. Things just haven't worked out no matter what you did in order to make yourself financially sustainable. Maybe you grappled with boom and bust cycles. Maybe it was impossible for you to balance a checkbook. Maybe you felt resentment about owing people or with people owing you. It's just financially been a very, very difficult time for you. So with Pluto moving through Capricorn, maybe it forced you to put on your big girl or your big boy Capricorn pants. You might have realized that you couldn't escape your financial situations. You might have seen that you weren't going to be able to do the things that you always saw yourself doing, or maybe you had to downgrade your expectations. But over this period of time, you might have felt very much that you had traded in your Sagittarius for Capricorn. And what I mean by that is you might have taken on jobs that paid the rent, that paid the bills. You might have found yourself turning into a workaholic where it was one gig after another, one paycheck after another. You might have gone full career, full on into a career that paid very, very well. And during this period of time, you may have still struggled financially, but you either got the finances under control in the past couple of years, or you might even have been really quite successful with your career aspirations or the direction that you decided to take your career. That's more along the lines of what I want to say. The things that you felt like you had to do to pay the bills, right? So Pluto and Capricorn might have kind of like nudged you into that direction, or it might have forced you into that direction, or it might have even bullied you into that direction. So that when Pluto entered the zodiac sign of Aquarius this year, at the beginning of the year, you might have felt like, that isn't me. Yeah, I've made a lot of money. Yeah, I can pay my bills and all these sorts of things. But this is something that I felt like I had to do and not something that I chose to do. And I don't think that this is me. And during this period of time that Pluto has been in Aquarius, you might have met people who recognized your talents, they recognized your aptitude and your ability. And they may have said, well, have you ever thought of picking this up again or doing this again? Or why are you working this job when you would be so much better and happier doing this? And so maybe this has gotten a lot of encouragement in this year. And maybe this is the direction that you want to go. So Pluto retrograding back down into Capricorn on September 1st might send a little bit of a shudder or chill through your horoscope. Maybe there's a financial stumbling block or shortfall or some sort of difficulty or problem that you have to face. And this may have you running back to, I should never have left this job or this career. I should never have questioned what was a good deal. I need to get back to that secure, stable place. Or maybe you're still in a secure, stable place and you've started something on the side and now it's like, I need to stop doing that and I have to go back and recommit to this. And so there may be a sense of like, I had it all wrong. I should never have I should never have been seduced by my aspirations or my visions. I should have always stayed with this. But you may find during this period that Pluto is back in Capricorn, even though necessity dictates a more practical response or necessity dictates don't go and follow your dream because you're not going to have the money you need, like in this situation with the problem that you're facing to take care of it. There's going to be a part of you that's not convinced that this is the way to go. There's going to be a part of you that's like, okay, I'll do what I need to do to get through this problem or to pay off this bill or face this financial issue. But I'm not going to go back to just living for the buck again. I need to be connected to what I want. What I see myself doing, what I'm yearning to do, what people are recognizing that I would be good at. Okay. And so that's what's going to happen during this period. So money, whether it's like money in the bank, and that's been a good thing, or money in terms of whether you'd owed it. And so you've been, in a kind of version of indentured servitude for these years. Money isn't going to be the bully that it's been. You need to have the horse back in front of the cart. And the horse are your talents, your aptitude, your skills, your aspirations. Okay, that's what needs to be back in front of the cart, which is, the way that you live your day-to-day life financially. So I think trying to go back to something and realizing it's not really you is actually going to embolden you to pursue those changes or those new opportunities that were opening up for you at the beginning of the year. And so it's also going to remind you that should things get difficult, you actually know what to do to take care of it. You don't have to go and just, be working for the paycheck that pays the bills anymore. You're enough financially savvy that you can do the things that you want. And there's no greater way to make money in this world than to do the things that you love to do the things that you enjoy. And being a Sagittarius, that enthusiasm is always key to your success. And that's something that I see you reconnecting to again, so that when Pluto re-enters Aquarius, that horse will be in front of the cart and you will be ready and raring to go. If you're a Capricorn or have Capricorn rising, when Pluto ended its residence in your zodiac sign, where it had been since 2008, at the beginning of this year, January 2024, you may have felt a tremendous rebirth. You may have felt a tremendous optimism and enthusiasm about your future. Okay, you went through the ordeals, you experienced the transformations that arise from them. You felt like, things were back on track again for you, maybe in the 2017, 2018, 2019 period. You may have felt very much like, okay, Pluto is the planet of ordeals and transformations that arise from them. I've gone through the ordeal part. I'm experiencing my transformation. I'm ready for the future. I'm ready to move on forward, And so this was a really, really good thing. You might have begun 2024 with a great deal of this excitement, anticipation, and enthusiasm. When Pluto changed signs and entered the zodiac sign of Aquarius, it's kind of like you're enjoying a warm shower and it's lovely and you've, lathered up and everything like that. And the water has suddenly gone cold. And it's like, it's like, what happened to the hot water? Okay. And that's because there's a big temperature shift when Pluto goes from having been in your sign and then goes into the sign that follows it. And so you might have found yourself being caught short, stumbling over yourself. You may have found that what you thought was the promise of your new rebirth life wasn't working out. And that might have thrown you into some kind of a shock. That might have also thrown you into a kind of confusion as to which road do you take. Now that you're reborn and you're showing off your butterfly wings of metamorphosis, why aren't you born aloft? Why isn't this taking you to all those places that it was supposed to take you? The reason is because you're a toddler. All right. Rebirth is still birth, even though we throw an R and an E in front of it. Okay. So if we go through a rebirth, we're not like reborn and here we are. We're toddlers. We're still sort of like getting up off the ground and balancing on the side of a table and maybe learning how to walk. We don't have our mature body, following a rebirth. This is why, people in more religious circles, they'll celebrate their rebirth and things like that, but sometimes they can slip back into their old ways because they're toddlers. The rebirth isn't a sensational change of life. That's not how Pluto works. You have to get used to it. You have to get your sea legs, for lack of a better way of putting it. And so even though Pluto is still traveling through a Saturn-ruled sign, Saturn rules Aquarius and Capricorn, it's still a very drastic change for you. So in other words, you might have sort of gotten a little bit out ahead of yourself, okay? And so some of you Capricorns might have been thrown off balance by this. You might have been like, cold water, where's the hot water, Other of you Capricorns might have recognized and responded with Pluto's change of sign to, you know what? This is where I go in my own direction. This is where I start something new. And I'm enough of a Capricorn to keep in mind, take it slow. Okay. So there's some goats that might have been so enthused by their rebirth that they scurried up the hill only to realize they were on toddler legs. And there were other goats that were like, I'm going to take it slow and see how this goes. I'm not quite used to this new terrain. So the rebirth experience is very real, but we're now into the following the rebirth experience, and we need to see how you're doing with that. Some Capricorns might be looking to go back to the way that things used to be, and other Capricorns might be like, okay, this is encouraging, but I don't really trust it fully yet. I still have to work with the old rubric here. And that's indeed what's going to come up with Pluto retrogrades back into your zodiac sign. Pluto retrograding back down into your zodiac sign is actually, I sort of see as being very reassuring for Capricorns. Pluto will be like, you're on the right track. This is where you're going. But Pluto back in Capricorn is also going to say, were you trying to repeat what you did before? Were you trying to recycle those old expectations? Were you trying to revive that sense of accomplishment? Were you trying to fire up those old ambitions? The old ambitions that had let you down maybe in the 2011 or the 2012 period. And were you trying to go back to that? You thought, oh, now that I've done my time in the desert, or my time finding myself, I can pick up who I was, again, back the person I was before Pluto entered my sign, the person I was in 2006, 2007, and now I can throw those ambitions back on the fire again. Pluto's going to say to you in no uncertain terms, no, you cannot. You are no longer that person, okay? You can't return to those expectations. You can't return to those accomplishments. You can't return to those ambitions, all right? They're not going to work. We're dealing with a new, transformed you. And you need to sort of put aside your Capricornian insistence, and you need to put aside your Capricornian, I don't know if I'm sold on this new future, and you need to embrace your future. You need to embrace it organically. In some ways, this mirrors some of the message for Geminis dealing with Pluto retrograding back down into Capricorn. You're kind of a little bit more on the Capricornian side of all of this. You can't go through a Pluto experience and say, okay, I'm going through this experience and now I want to get back to who I was before this experience happened. I want the same success I had before. I want the same status I had before. I want the same money that I had before. That's not how Pluto works. Pluto has introduced you to the new you. And with the new you comes new expectations, new plans, new aspirations that are organic, that are in keeping with who you are today and not the person you were before Pluto entered the zodiac sign of Capricorn. You can't treat Pluto's transit through your sign as a timeout. It's a growth experience. It's an internal growth experience. And you need to see how that internal growth experience translates to the world you're living in right now. As I said before, Pluto back in Capricorn is going to be very reassuring, and it's going to be very centering. It's going to be like calling up your therapist and saying, I'm going through this really rough time again. And the therapist like, okay, let's talk about what we do when you're experiencing a panic attack like this. What you want to do is X, Y, Z. Pluto and Capricorn is going to be more reassuring. Let's talk about what we do when you go through this panic or when you go through this it's not working thing. So it would be very reassuring, very supportive, very centering. But you also have to work with it. You can't go back to who you were before. You need to go ahead. But what's really wonderful about going ahead is that you're more willing and able than you think you are. You got spooked. Pluto maybe going back into Capricorn spooked you a bit, or maybe the difficulties you had with Pluto and Aquarius spooked you a bit. It's kind of like the kid who's introduced to kindergarten and this is the first time that they're in a classroom situation and they turn around and run back to their mother. It's this, you need to help that kid into the kindergarten situation. And that's kind of what's going on here with you. You need to let yourself move forward. You need to trust that what you're experiencing in your life right now is bolstering who you are right now. And you need to trust in that unknown but familiar you. who is now moving forward with your life. Put your trust in that, and you'll find that this transition of Pluto into Aquarius, which begins again on November 17th, that you're actually much more comfortable with it than you thought. You just got spooked. You just got frightened a bit. So, do what you do when you get spooked and frightened and re-engage, and you're going to be absolutely fine. Aquarians did battle with a lot of inner demons during the period of time that Pluto was traveling through the zodiac sign of Capricorn from 2008 until January of this year. Pluto was situated in such a way that it really sort of brought up a lot of your anxieties and a lot of your fears. And it brought them up in such a way that you were continually questioning whether you were capable or able to take on the responsibilities or the obligations that were being loaded onto your shoulders. Now, being an Aquarius, you would have really worked on refining the appearance of being everything's under control, that you're under control, everything's going the way that you had planned it all along, and things are great. Okay. But underneath, those anxieties might have really eaten away at you. And you might have found that coping mechanisms that you would put into place, whether that was disconnecting or denying, or whether it was outside stimulants or burying yourself in work, that these coping mechanisms weren't working. And there were a couple of points during Pluto's travel through Capricorn where the inner demons might have been winning. Not only were they kind of winning, but they might have almost been undermining your progress. There might have been a shift or change in the 2018 period, or maybe even the 2021 period, where instead of battling or repressing or suppressing these inner demons, you began working with them. You might have even began accepting them into your life. It's kind of like in the Oresteia, the Greek play Oresteia, when the Furies go from Furies into the Eumenides. They go from vengeful spirits into guardian spirits. This is something that can happen during a Pluto transit, where the things that you felt were bringing you down, you might have realized that your coping mechanisms were what was bringing you down, and that if you worked with the fears and the anxieties, if you got to know them on a first-name basis, that they could become strengths, that they could become resources for you, that they could lead you in the dark where you really couldn't find your way and where all the landmarks were suddenly rendered unfamiliar. What this has done is that it's really brought you to you. You've really, what's the phrase? You've really come into yourself. And this is something that you may very well have experienced when Pluto entered the zodiac sign of Aquarius at the beginning of this year, of really sort of coming into who you are. And there may be a confidence and a surety that's very strong right now, a confidence and a surety that may even grow even stronger once Neptune and Uranus change zodiac signs in 2025. Being born under the planet Saturn, we all know that Uranus is the modern ruler of Aquarius, but Saturn was the traditional ruler. Self-questioning and doubts are something that you also rely upon in your life. You rely on them so that you never get too full of yourself. You rely on them so that you're braced for things suddenly turning south. And you rely on them for scrutiny. They bring a capacity of critical thinking into your life. But there is such a thing as them maybe doing it a little bit too much. Okay. And this period of time when Pluto retrogrades back down into Capricorn on September 1st, you may have an experience from September 1st, maybe into October, where you get a chill up and down the spine of your astrological chart. Something happens that reminds you of that conflict with your inner demon. Something happens that throws you back into that kind of like maybe rigid approach that you have to yourself, or maybe where you abandon yourself altogether and you're full of anxiety and worry. And what you're going to see when you do that is that it's very easy for those feelings to come back, and they may even, surge forward for you. But there's another part of you that's not having anything of it. There's another part of you that's going to be like, I'm not going back to that again. I'm not going to do that again. I've come too far. I've worked with my apprehensions. I'm not going to hand over the authority of my life to self-doubt, apprehensions, or maybe even self-sabotaging behavior. I'm not going to do that. I'm not that person anymore. And this discovery will be almost like moving a stone into a foundation place. Okay, it's almost like moving a stone into its cornerstone foundational place in your horoscope, so that when Pluto re-enters Aquarius on November 17th, I'm not saying you're suddenly going to be like fear-free or, I'm bigger than my... No, it'll be like, you know what? Going down that rabbit hole, questioning myself and leaning into it really, really strongly, that's not a good idea. I don't want to do that anymore. That's a form of self-harm. And I'm not even that person anymore. So I'm going to lie myself with owning Pluto. The wonderful thing about Aquarius is you've had a dress rehearsal of Pluto. With Pluto going through Capricorn and Saturn ruled just like you, the sign before you. All of that Pluto transit in Capricorn was kind of a dress rehearsal for you. So you're not starting at square one with Pluto entering your sign. You're building on the 16 years that Pluto was in your previous sign. This is something which is very unique to Aquarius, following a Saturn-ruled sign. So you're going to know how to place that cornerstone, and what you may be experiencing is less, a confidence of I can do this, and more of a confidence of I'm going to not do this. I'm going to not criticize myself. I'm not going to attack myself. I'm not going to undermine myself. I'm going to have the confidence to not do that, because sometimes by self-criticizing or getting down on yourself, that's a comfort. That can be a comfort zone, a comfort space. And so the choice not to do that can be very affirming, but that comes with a confidence and a faith that you have in yourself, a confidence and a faith that Pluto in Aquarius is going to connect you to in a very fundamental way. I smile when I think about talking to people who are Pisces or Pisces rising about Pluto retrograding back into Capricorn. Pluto in Capricorn, for people born under Pisces, it's really pushed you to be the person you've always been. We usually talk about, this experience has pushed me to be the person I should be, or have always wanted to be, or the person that I've aspired to be. What Pluto has done in its residency in the zodiac sign of Capricorn is that it has pushed you to be the person you've always been, all right? Now, if these are positive attributes, these positive attributes are coming out, that you are accomplishing or fulfilling all the things that you wanted to. And if this has a bit of a negative bent, Pluto pushing you to be the person that you've always been might have also heightened the things that might have been a little bit on the negative or the self-sabotaging side. I mean, this is basically what Pluto has done. We've talked about Pluto being associated to the seed self. It's a planet that really is in charge of that seed growing into yourself and out into your life. Sometimes when a seed grows, it grows in unexpected ways. Like I planted that seed and I thought it was going to be a cosmos, and instead it's a daffodil. I don't know. I'm just coming up with something that what we see isn't always what we get when we're dealing with Pluto. Things can come out that we didn't know were there in the genetic makeup or the astrological genetic makeup of our lives. But the thing is, Pluto has brought out who you have always been. And my feeling is it's brought it out in a good way. You might have gone through some rough spots there, some areas where you might have turned left when you should have turned right. And there might have been a couple of cul-de-sacs or even dead ends. But Pluto has really been with you, Pisces, this whole time. It's been working in a sextile energy with Neptune moving through your zodiac sign. Neptune entered Pisces in 2012. So Pluto has been aiding and abetting that energy, so that what emerged at the end of 2023 was you, and you who you really are, and probably a comfort with who you are. I mean, it can be argued you've had Saturn going through your zodiac sign, but Saturn in your zodiac sign has also kind of acted as an organizing influence. It's kind of like organized the different attributes of yourself. It's forced you, and that hasn't always been comfortable, but it's forced you to be more results driven. Instead of talking about something or wondering if anything would be, Saturn has kind of like held up the clock and said, time, deadline, and that's forced you to produce. And that's a good thing. So that when Pluto entered the zodiac sign of Aquarius at the beginning of the year, that was a different pond for you to be a fish in. All right. It's a different flavor. It's a different temperature than Pluto in Capricorn. And Pluto in Aquarius may have introduced you to a world that's always been there, but you weren't paying a lot of attention to. So you might have had a big turnover in your friendships. You might have had a big turnover in your relationships. You might have had a big turnover in your surroundings with Pluto entering the zodiac sign of Aquarius. And so it might have taken some getting used to. But my feeling is that it's probably been more positive than negative. That there might have been a sadness with the turnover of things, with saying goodbye to what was old and familiar. But at the same time, the new energy coming into your life might have also been very inviting and even welcoming. My big concern here, and this is what I think is going to be positive about Pluto retrograding back down into Capricorn for you. My big concern here is that life has really mirrored what you've wanted it to be. Life has maybe even given you what you've wanted in life. You might have realized your aspirations. But my concern here is, do you recognize it? Do you recognize what has materialized in your life as being a vision, a dream, a wish that you had? Sometimes we can be very fickle with our dreams and our wishes. We can, I wish I had this. I wish I had that. It's kind of like, clicking on the Amazon shopping cart function when you're bored and just like, I'm just going to click away. And and we can be fickle with our dreams and our visions. And we can forget that we had those, or that we wanted those things. And sometimes we can forget because we moved on to something else. Or sometimes it came into our life and we were like, oh, that's good. And we went on to the next idea. A lot of what's materialized in your life right now is based on things that you had imagined or wanted for yourself, probably back in 2006, 2007. Things that you might have felt were beyond reach. Well, they've shown up, but do you recognize them? Do you appreciate them? Do you appreciate how well things are going? I mean, even when things are going well, we can find problems, and rightly, there are problems or issues or questions. But have you not registered what life has delivered or provided for you? This is what's going to happen when Pluto retrogrades back down into Capricorn. Now, it's not going to be like, oh, you unappreciative Pisces, you. It's not going to be like that, but it's going to show you that you've actually accomplished the things you wanted to accomplish, or you've gotten to a place in your life that you've wanted to be. And that maybe you should spend a little less time with the yearning for or the longing for. Pisces, because it's ruled by Neptune, has a lot of yearning and a lot of longing, and the phrase is you're usually yearning for something you can't have or longing for something that will never be. What I've seen happen a lot in Pisces is that they have gotten those things, and those things have also materialized in their life, but they're more wrapped up in the longing and the yearning. So in a very gentle way, Pluto retrograding back down into Capricorn is going to show you you've gotten these things, you've received these things, and let yourself appreciate them. Let yourself welcome them. Be grateful, not in a ungrateful guilt trip way, but be grateful that these things are a part of your life. Now, Pisces can get existential with the best of them, like, yes, these things are a part of my life, but they're fleeting, they're ephemeral, they can't last forever. And there's a lovely earthiness to a Pluto in Capricorn, which is like, well, they may be fleeting and they may not last forever. They may be ephemeral, but they're here. And are you really going to send back that wonderful meal that's been served? Are you really going to return a pet that you adopted that is a marvelous companion for you because you're afraid of future heartbreak? There's a beautiful kind of acceptance of mortality. There's a real beautiful acceptance of living in your time, living in your day that comes with Pluto retrograding back down into Capricorn. And what I think this is going to do is sort of like reorient your perspective so that it's less, as I said, longing and yearning, and it's more about appreciating and perhaps even celebrating all the wonderful things that you have.